Lou Geneux is one of the hosts of the Card Talk podcast. He hails from New Jersey, and he's an avid fan of the New York Jets, the Houston Astros, and whichever college football team seems like they might have a shot at the national title. Lou, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that introduction. That's fair. I'm just going to ride. That's fair.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you get some grief about on your show, and so I thought I'd just add to the grief a little bit.
It's fair.
As we kick things off here today.
I think it's valid, though. Like, I think my rooting interest makes sense in my brain, but to no one else it makes sense, and they seem like two blue blood programs, so I get that.
It's good stuff, and so yeah. I appreciate you joining me. I've had your two fellow co-hosts on the show. I've had them on prior episodes. I wanted to complete the Card Talk trifecta and bring you on today to get a little bit about your background in the hobby, learn a little bit more about who Lou Geneux is. So thank you for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And no one knows this but us, but I messed up yesterday and wasn't available. So happy you're making time for me this evening.
Oh, it was equal. I think we both played a role in our scheduling conflict on the first time we tried to get together. So I'm glad we're getting a chance to do that today. Let's start with a little bit about your hobby background, your collecting background. If I understand correctly, you first were exposed to cards when you were a kid, and let's hear a little bit about kind of what your journey's been like in the hobby.
Sure. Yeah. I would say my initial entry into the cards is probably Pokemon, like 01, 02, but I would say I wasn't thinking about card collecting as like a hobby until LeBron's rookie year, which is 03. Obviously. So back then I used to go to card shows with my dad, Gary Vaynerchuk, my boss, his brother AJ, and another one of his close friends. We used to all go to card shows together. We would go buy boxes. I opened untold packs of Bowman Chrome 2003 basketball. So that was my first initial entry. I spent a lot of time on eBay. I think I've told this before. I was the bad kid who had access to my dad's eBay account and was buying signed LeBron James and signed Carmelo Anthony pictures to hang up in my room without his knowledge. Definitely got in a good amount of trouble for that back in the day. So when I do hear those stories, I know it's like the common, my kid bought it for me, but I actually lived that experience. So I tend to have a little bit of, I feel bad for people like that. So that was my initial. And then I want to say 2017-ish, I got back in with Gary. Once I had been a full-time employee at Vayner and spending a lot more time with Gary, we got back into it and kind of been rocking and rolling ever since then. So I guess that's almost 6 years now.
What was it about that time in 2017 that kind of prompted you to get interested again? What, was it that nostalgia aspect? Was it just some other friends were getting involved and it piqued your interest? Or had you, started to find cards through some other avenue or platform at that period of time? What was it in that period that brought you back?
Yeah. So for me, it started with Gary. I was working pretty closely with Gary on a day-to-day standpoint, from a day-to-day, timing at that point. And he had gone to the Cleveland National, I want to say. I think it was summer 2017. And he came back. Oh, he was texting us while he was there and was like, this is happening. We have to get back involved. Like, don't you remember like buying the LeBrons and all? Like, that was pretty much the entire conversation. And so from there, I was helping him doing some buying and learning together. And to be honest, and I've said this before too, is like in the beginning, it was like just another thing I was doing at work. I was like helping Gary with this thing. And then as time went on, I was kind of like, oh, wait, I kind of really like this. Like, I like the basketball cards, especially in the beginning, because that's what I knew. And then I was thinking Pokemon, and it snowballs from there. So
was it basketball that you were buying first? Kind of that first step
when I had first come back in, yeah, because that was where Gary was spending a lot of his time. And so that's what I was exposed to. So I knew about the Tops and the Prisms at that point. So that was where I felt like I had the most knowledge. Baseball was still such a foreign concept at that point. By now, I would say I'm way more into baseball than I am basketball. I would say I don't care about basketball cards pretty much at all at this point. But basketball seemed easy enough, especially the type of stuff that Gary was interested in and that I was looking at as well was more of the vintage. It was like Tops. It was just a matter of which year it was. it seems silly to talk about now, but at that time, I'm like, all right, so they have Prism, they have this thing called Optic, they have Select, they have National Treasures. It was just too many things in the modern world at that point. So I stuck to what I knew.
Yeah, looking back at when you were a kid and in 2003, opening up a bunch of Chrome, looking for LeBron, the question that I always get when people are talking to me about collecting as a kid was, do you still have all those, or did you get rid of them? And so, when you think about the number of LeBron rookies that you were probably going through at that period of time, did you get to hang on to many of those, or did those find their way into other people's collections?
I think they found their way into other people's collections. If I'm being honest with you, I wasn't the keeper of those cards. They were with my dad. And then over the years, he moves, I move, boxes get lost. We decide to sell stuff randomly over the years. I found all my Pokemon cards. I found old baseball cards. I have this crazy, I actually should probably find it. It's like a baseball card, obviously. It's like a Mickey Mantle. I want to say it's a used bat card of Mickey Mantle or something that I
Yeah.
have somewhere. I found all that stuff, but my basketball cards are MIA. It was always, I had a million LeBrons, I had a million Carmelo Anthony's, and I had a million TJ Ford cards. If you remember TJ Ford,
Yeah.
those are my three big guys that I collected back then.
So you got back into it.
Mm-hmm.
You were collecting more and more. You were picking it back up.
Yeah,
What led to the start of the show of Card Talk?
COVID. We were home. 2019 National. Tyler and I were walking around. Tyler and I were walking around the end of the show, and we were like, man, there just seems like there's no pod that isn't heavily data focused. Was like, that was the trigger in our mind. Everything at that time, if you remember, a lot of the cards content was very data based. It was all like, this is how much this card sold for 6 months ago, this is how much it sold for today. That was pretty much all of it. We kind of felt, okay, we're never going to be the data guys. Like, I'm not the numbers guy, but I do think I have a good feel for, here's what's happening in sports, here's my take on this. So we kind of went for a more conversational route. And then we were thinking, all right, who are the more entertaining people in cards? And the number one person that came to mind was Ryan. He was one of the first people that I talked to when I had first gotten back into cards as well. So we had already had a relationship. We started talking more and more. And then all of a sudden we're doing test shows, and away we went.
Yeah, what I like about your show is it blends kind of the idea of fandom, right? You are all three passionate about your sports, the things that you're a fan of, the teams that you're a fan of.
Yeah.
It also adds, Ryan has boots on the ground knowledge of running a card shop, all the different releases, the interaction between the different manufacturers, some of the big industry shows, so he's able to provide some of that boots on the ground knowledge. And you and Tyler, don't take this the wrong way, but especially as you were getting started,
This is
you
right.
guys were able to provide that perspective of a new or a returning collector
100%.
who is interested but doesn't have the
Yes.
multiple decades of experience directly dealing in cards, right?
Yeah,
And
we're the layman.
I think that combination has worked well for you guys and makes it entertaining. There's been times where I've found myself yelling at the screen and sometimes maybe responding in a tweet to you guys or the show of, hey, what are you guys talking about? That is not the only way to look at this topic or this idea. But it's made it entertaining and it's made it engaging.
Definitely. And I mean, like, responding online, that's just conversation. Everyone's having a good time, of course, always. I 100% agree. I would never consider myself to be an expert in the hobby. I would never consider myself to be someone who knows more than someone who's been around for. This hobby is built of people who have been around for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? So I would never even lie to myself and think that I know more than them. I would say and I'll speak for myself, the hobby also is very hive minded and has very similar opinions on things. And I think where I come from, at least, is I think about things a little bit differently. I don't necessarily I'm not talking to everyone in the hobby the way everyone else is on a day-to-day basis. Like Ryan is like you're saying, in the weeds, boots on the ground, talking to people in the industry. And you can kind of, there's some trends that come out of those conversations when you're talking to similar people over and over again. And in a world where I'm not spending as much time with those people, I think I have a different opinion. And of course, I'm like the most, I don't know what the right word is. I guess you can use the word arrogant about my opinions from time to time. And I've tried to get better about that for sure. I've tried to be better about listening to different perspectives and seeing it a different way. But I do think, like you're saying, that I think that's a big, part of our show, is that the three of us really have different perspectives. We tend to get to the same places. We tend to get to the same finishing line, but I think we come at it from three different angles almost every time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that aspect of the hobby, is that there's so many different ways to collect. There's so many different angles that people can take when they approach collecting. That's one of the things that I've really appreciated too about my own approach is different than other people. My focus on flipping and selling low end cards and making money on low end cards to be able to cover the cost of everything I want to add. So many people overlook that stuff as worthless junk, and yet it's made me thousands and thousands of dollars over the last few years and build my collection for free. Yet other people only want to have a very narrow focus collection. They only want to purchase. They don't want to think about selling or the business side of the hobby. And there's so many different ways to approach it. I appreciate hearing those different perspectives, and that comes from interests, backgrounds, experience levels, all of that, comes into play. So I really appreciate that.
Most definitely.
One of the other things that you take some abuse, or maybe it's just my perspective, you take some abuse on the show, is that you're the resident baseball fan.
Yes.
On the show. Everybody else might give you a little bit of grief for that. What is it about baseball that attracts you? That's one of those things that from our generation, it seems like we're aging out. There's the newer generations seem to not be as interested in baseball. What is it that interests you about baseball?
I mean, that's hard to, I don't know. Like it's always been my first love. I've always loved baseball. I mean, it was the first, well, that's not true. It's the second sport I played. It's the sport I played the longest. I was never any good. So I'm not going to say that I was any good. I didn't play in high school or anything like that, but like I've watched it the longest. And frankly, I got lucky that the team that I really love and care about has been on a historic run of greatness, right? So they're playing meaningful games. I'm paying more attention. That's just a natural use. At least for me, I give more of myself to something when there's something to care about. Like the Jets are horrible, so it's really not. I can only give it so much mental energy. And for the next couple of weeks, I will. But soon enough, they'll be finished, and I'll be out, and I'll be focused on the Astros. So yeah, I got lucky that my team is really, really good. It also helps that my team is like the villains of baseball. That also gets me excited. So yeah.
How did you become a Houston Astros fan?
So my best friend, shout out Matt Kaplan, that's my guy. We were best friends growing up. I was a Yankees fan as a young child. My dad was a Yankees fan. I was brought up in New York area. You're brought up to be a Yankees fan. I slowly lost interest in baseball in like my early teens. Like my early teens. And then I was in high school. Me and Matt are hanging out. I have no rooting interest in baseball, but I played hardcore fantasy baseball. So I knew a lot about prospects. I knew the Astros. This was right around the time they took Springer, Correa, Mark Appel was around this time as well. Yep. So they have all these highly touted prospects. And I'm talking to Matt, and he's like, just be an Astros fan with me. It's fun. It's no big deal. Like, they're terrible. You have nothing to worry about. So I'm like, great. I can just care about the prospects. And one day, if they're good, it'll give me something to be excited about. And then 5 years later, they're competing for World Series. So,
how about the Jets? Have you been a lifelong Jets fan too?
Yeah,
or did
the
that
Jets
have
is religion.
Some other influence from Gary?
No, the Jets is religion. Well, it does, but I've been a Jets fan since I was 9. I was a Packers fan when I was a little kid, but only because it was like Brett Favre. I liked Brett Favre, and that was the reason I liked the Packers. As soon as I had a rooting interest in a team, it was always the Jets. My dad and Gary spent a lot of time together back in the day, so I used to hang out with them. We used to go to games, we used to watch games together, all that stuff. They're getting ready to go to a road trip somewhere. They were going to some road Jets game. I think this is the story. And I wasn't allowed to go because I wasn't an official Jets fan. Gary wouldn't let me go. And I was like, okay, well, I guess if I have to be a Jets fan, I'll be a Jets fan. And that's how it started. And now it's the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, it's, I can relate a lot because I'm a Bears fan. And so,
can I pause for 1 second? I shouldn't just put that on Gary. That was definitely my dad, number one, Gary, and that whole crew together. But Gary's a big part of that story.
But yes, I'm a Bears fan, right? So outside of when I was young and we won Super Bowl 20, beat the Patriots soundly in Super Bowl
Mm-hmm.
20, and then went to the Super Bowl again. It's been, I guess, 15, 20 years ago now, when we went and played the Colts and lost in that one. It's been a miserable experience being a Bears fan for most of that period of time, and also a Cubs fan. And outside of 2016, I had 100 years of anguish
Misery.
being a Cubs fan. So I know what it's like to be a fan of a team that seems to be struggling and get our hopes up and then let us down. So
What do you think about Fields?
yeah, Fields is one of those that I was optimistic when they drafted him,
Mm-hmm.
because I was a pretty big college fantasy sports player too, right? And I used
Okay.
him a lot in college fantasy sports, and so I knew he had potential. Um, but yeah, right now I don't know. I'm again, I don't profess to be an NFL scouting expert, right? And so there was flashes. We've seen flashes of brilliance from him. Um, Even last year we lost a ton of games, but he looked good using his legs. There's always the questions of his arm. This year he's not running, and is that his doing, or is that the team's coaching decisions and the plays that are being called? I don't know. I'm not confident that he's the answer, but I also am not confident that it's all his fault that we're not having the success that we were hoping for.
Yeah, I think it's funny, and I don't mean to derail the whole conversation, but that 2021 draft class was one that was so hyped up, especially in the hobby. And it seems like, and you can even argue that maybe Trevor's not everything that we thought he would be. The quarterbacks in that draft are pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. It's just funny, like these teams find themselves in situations, and then it trickles down to the hobby where it's like, oh, Zach Wilson was the number 2 pick, so then he should be valued at X, Y, or Z, and that's not really how it works in the real world.
Yeah, and I just don't know how much of it, like I said, is the organization versus Fields himself.
Yeah,
There's part of me that says, um, I'm not sure if we would have drafted Mahomes instead of Trubisky, that Mahomes would have looked terrible too.
of
Just
course.
because he was in Chicago and as a member of my Bears. So I don't even I don't know for sure about
Yeah.
the where things are going to go. One of the things that I touched on when I was asking about baseball is the demographics of baseball collectors. And one of the things I talked about recently on my podcast is that I had a grandfather and a grandson come into the shop, and the grandfather is a big baseball fan, loved Pete Rose and that era of players. His grandson 100% focused on collecting soccer cards, is not interested in baseball at this point anymore, any of those types of things. It's all about collecting soccer cards. And it seems like we've had a little bit of a shift of the younger demographic being interested maybe in soccer, interested in Pokemon and some of the other gaming cards and that type of thing. I was curious what your perspective has been in the conversations that you've had, and what you're seeing. Have you noticed a shift in generational collecting, as far as anything that you've been able to take from that?
Yeah, and I haven't really fully formed my thought. But of course, there's been a downturn in baseball for younger fans. I think that's a result of decades of them ignoring how slow their game was, decades of them, not allowing, not decades, years of them not letting clips on social media live, where all these kids spend all of their time. Every single kid in the world goes on YouTube, but they go on YouTube Shorts now and they watch sports highlights all the time. And in a world where a league is not going to allow their stuff to be online, you're going to lose a generation of fans, right? So to me, that part's not as surprising from a collecting standpoint. I think kids are going to go where the attention is, like especially younger kids are going to go where the attention is. And soccer has seen an immense increase in awareness in the last couple of years. That's partly, capped off with Messi coming to America, and that did way more. That did so much more than I thought it was going to do from just like a mass awareness standpoint. That to me, it kind of validated the last year and a half of soccer, 2 years of soccer stuff that seemed way more speculative than it turned out to be, at least in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's just years and years of baseball ignoring the younger generation. and years of soccer grabbing the attention instead.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. There's from a collecting perspective, there's still, I think, by far a greater number of baseball collectors, but I'm interested to
100%.
see how in the coming years, as we start to see this new generation of collectors come in, if we start to see that shift. And it might take years and years and years, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Forever it's been football cards don't carry the same weight as baseball cards. Basketball cards don't carry the same weight as basketball cards. We started to see that shift a little bit over these last few years,
Yeah.
where they're not all the way on par yet, but they're shifting. And I'm wondering if we're going to see that same thing come to fruition with, with soccer. But
something that's interesting about that though is I still think baseball is very, very popular from a regional standpoint. At least here, I feel baseball is extremely popular still, right? But that just hasn't translated into cards. So I just don't know how to rectify those two things to where I still feel baseball is the third most watched sport in the United States. Soccer doesn't feel close to that.
Right.
But the cards are way higher. So I don't really know how to put those two things together,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm also interested in, over these last few years, as you've got into it, as you've build up your knowledge base and your education, how has your collecting focus shifted? Are you still, what are you pursuing now? What's your personal collection look like, and how's that evolved over these last couple of years?
So I used to, if you've heard the show, which I think we had a conversation about it. I pretty much like didn't have a PC. Like I sort of, I think it was because I was scared, right? I was like, okay, the Jets, I'm not buying any Jets anytime soon. I bought an Elijah Moore and I got burnt on that one. And the Astros, it was like I wanted to have Astros cards, but I didn't really know what like a really good baseball card looked and felt like until I got familiar with Dynasty. So I stayed away. I always like I have a ton of Bregman Bowman first. I have a bunch of Jeremy Pena Bowman first, but the real PC stuff for me now, as I've spent more time in the hobby, is I've tried to downsize and focus on my favorite players on my favorite teams, the best stuff I can have, plus random stuff like the bowling card or Lorcana. When I see, if I feel something with Lorcana, I'll take a shot on something like that. But yeah, I would say I've transitioned into almost exclusively buying my favorite players on my favorite teams or random stuff because it's more fun to own that, in my opinion. That to me has become way more fun than speculating on like Trae Young.
Yep. How has, you mentioned Lorcana, how does non-sports cards or entertainment cards fit into your interests?
So outside of cards, if I'm not watching sports, I'm watching video games, I'm watching reality TV, I watch a ton of movies, I still watch old episodes of Pokemon all the time, stuff like that, right? So my interests are pretty varied. As much as I love sports, I love television and movies and music just as much. So for me, it's all part of the same thing. Lorcana got my attention because I was like, cool. I haven't seen any Elsa cards that have real, that have a real investment from Disney. Because that's the other part of it too. You can kind of tell what the investment is from like the licensor, I guess is the right term. You can tell how invested they are in the thing, which has an impact on how valuable it'll be long term. Because if they care about it, there'll be other versions of it, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, when I saw Lorcana, I was like, oh, cool, they're doing a real TCG. Oh wow, it's their real tier 1 serious characters who have real fans and all that, and a lot of lore and all of that. So for me, that was kind of where I got into Lorcana. But then in general, non-sport is just, I like memes. I like all of those things. So the bowling card fits in perfectly with that.
Yeah. I've found myself getting almost as interested and excited about some of the entertainment cards that I've gotten over the last few years as I have about sports. So I kind of gone in on Stranger Things, the original 2018 Topps release, and kind of pursuing all of those and autographs and things that go with that. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so going after all of the vintage Star Wars sets and cards and the O-Pee-Chee Canadian versions and all of that. and finding some of the weird oddball food issue,
Mm-hmm.
vintage Star Wars, like some of that kind of stuff has been super fun and exciting to track down for me, even though it's a little bit off the beaten path from the stuff we hear about every day.
And in the world of the hobby, it's something new, right? Like I'll only speak for myself. Especially during COVID, spent so much time thinking about sports cards that I was like, I just need something different. Like I need something new to look at. I need something different to learn about. And that kind of sent me down that path.
Very cool. We've also experienced a lot of hobby news over these last few weeks. We've
Tons.
exclusive licenses. We've got Fanatics coming in. We've got lawsuits between Panini and Fanatics.
Mhm.
We've got leagues pulling licenses and redistributing them early. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of conversation, and that's going to play out in the courts, over time. And that's not really what I'm necessarily focused on today. But part of that is because for me, my hobby interest, my collecting has shifted over these last couple of years away from buying as much new wax
Mhm.
and more on some of the players sets, vintage, other things that I'm interested in. And so for me, I've experienced that I'm not overly anxious about what this current round of news means, because that's not where my hobby interest is currently focused. How does that play out for you when you think about some of these things going on? How do you view that and its impact on your enjoyment of the hobby and your ability to collect what you want to collect?
Yeah. So I think I used to care a lot more about like the stuff that was happening in the hobby, right? Like I would care a lot more about WWE deciding they're going to go with Fanatics and pulling their Panini license. I would care a lot more about um, you know, box prices and like debating the value of a box price, right? But I kind of am coming to realize that number one, the law stuff and the PAs making deals and all that, that's like way above my pay grade, things I don't understand at all. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is people always talk about like, okay, so what is Panini WWE product going to be worth versus the new Fanatics product? I've always, and maybe this is wrong, and you'll tell me. I would love to hear what you think about it. The It's just a snapshot. The stuff that comes out in that year is just a snapshot of what was available at that time. I don't necessarily think I'm going to keep the WWE example. And I'm not as tuned into WWE these days, so I might be wrong about this. Bianca Belair, I think, is still a WWE wrestler. Bianca Belair Panini card is versus a Bianca Belair Fanatics card. The one that's going to sell for more is the nicer card, I would imagine. Right? It's not necessarily because it's Fanatics or Panini. I don't think that has an impact on the ground day to day with people buying product.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've had a harder time getting a hold of is how much of the current values that we're seeing for that Panini product is because there are people who have come over who love Prism, and so this is a new version of Prism, right? I think there's been some good that has come from some of the photography, and that, like you said, the quality of the card that has brought some interest. But I don't know where that's going to go long term. I don't know how much credence we can give to some of the arguments like that I've heard of. Oh well, now there's only going to be 2 years of Prism, so it's going to be through the roof. Or because I don't know if that's true or not. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, we still have people who are going back and collecting, wrestling sets and that were from 2013, 2014, and some of those Topps Chrome cards are some of the most sought out cards that we're seeing for um, Roman Reigns and The Rock and all of those guys. So I don't know. I'm not trying to. I've not enjoyed the idea that I'm going to be some kind of prognosticator that can call out what all of these things mean. They can be
Mhm.
fun to debate. They can be fun to think through. But at the end of the day, none of us really know. I don't think.
No. Um, I think you would definitely know this. You talk in front of a mic enough times, people tend to think that you're a prognosticator, even when you're not trying to be. So I could definitely feel that one.
Yep.
Um, and then on the Panini, like, they really like Prism. In that scenario, right? If you're a collector who loves Panini Prism but hates Topps Chrome, I get that. That's rough for you. I feel bad for someone who can no longer collect WWE stuff because it's not Prism anymore. But I feel like by and large, whatever is available to people is what they're going to purchase.
Have these things, are they going to impact your interest or what you collect or how you approach the hobby? Whether it's a
As long
Panini
as the
product,
quality is
whether
good,
it's
I
a
don't care.
Fanatics product, or are you also shifting to focus on things that have already been released, or how does that
As
impact what you're going to collect?
as long as the quality is good, I'm ready for the next thing. I'm always interested in you know, I don't want to use the word innovation because how much innovation are you really putting on a piece of cardboard? But like the way, like, I'm more interested in what things will look like in the future. As long as as long as the cards look good, as long as they're not gonna come out miscut, as long as we can minimize the duplicate superfractors that are coming out into the world, all of those type of things, I'm fine.
What's your hope for the future of the hobby? Like when you think about all of the change that's happening, when you think about the bigger base of collectors that we have now than we had prior to COVID, we think about record sales at the record sales for dealers at the National, record attendance at the National, but all of this kind of internal turmoil that we're seeing. We've seen prices spike, we've seen prices come back to more normal levels.
Yeah.
When you think about all of that, kind of what's your hope for the future of the hobby in kind of your ideal world?
It's twofold for me. It's number one, availability of product. That to me is the number one hindrance to the growth of the hobby. It is the number one hindrance to getting kids more involved. Kids don't have $250 to spend on one pack of cards on whatnot. I know that happens now, but if you scale that out over years, that's not realistic. So you need to have product that is priced for different audiences. You have product that's priced for kids. You have product that's priced for set collectors and people who want to collect their favorite player. You have like a like a mid high tier product that is available, and then you have your high end stuff. I think the high end stuff should continue. I think they should honestly go even higher end. Like I'd be down for all of that. Get real game used jerseys, get photo match stuff, get real things and you can charge 5, 8, $10,000 for a box. People are going to buy it if it's worth it, you know? So I think it's availability and like options, I would say is important to me. And then also in general, just everyone take it down a couple notches. We're all going to be fine. This is not supposed to be something that is like testosterone and tough guy and everyone's yelling at each other. Like everybody just take it down a notch. Those are my two hopes.
Yeah, I get a lot of comments about the sky is falling. It's going to be so different. Going forward, they're going to run this hobby into the ground, or it's not going to be any good without this brand anymore. Any of those types of things. And one of the things that I always come back to is, listen, this hobby's been around for 100 years. Like we've got cards dating back to the 1800s if you want to collect those, right? This is seen ebbs and flows, ups and downs, companies come, companies go, and regardless of what the new thing is, there's plenty for us to collect for a while, and eventually it's going to all get figured out if we look at it
It all
from
comes
a
out in the
bigger
wash.
picture. Like you said, let's take it down a notch. Let's just relax a little bit and let things play out and work themselves out.
That's always my thing. I found myself getting caught in arguments a couple times, and then I like looked at my phone and I'm like, what am I arguing about right now? This is so unnecessary. I just think people get worked up because they care about it. Everyone's passionate about the hobby, as they should be. That's what makes it so great. I just think everyone would do well to like you're saying, it'll all come out in the wash. And just because a new company is coming in doesn't mean they're going to make it better or worse. Both sides, right? Like, oh, that's not true. I have hope that they will make it better, right? We can all hope for things to improve over time. But all the bad things aren't as bad as they say, and all of the good and amazing things aren't as good and amazing as they say either.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Hey, is there anything else that you want to cover today? Anything that was on your mind that we didn't hit on?
I mean, I don't know. I would love to talk about all these random little hobby things. I mean, I saw that CGC video. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if you saw that. Um, I'm interested in like cool stuff. Like, what's your favorite thing right now? What's happening in your shop? Like, tell me everything.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm, the way that our shop is set up, or the way that I'm set up, is I have a shop within a shop. So I have dedicated floor space within the kind of main hobby shop in our
Oh,
town.
that's cool.
And so one of those agreements is that I don't sell brand new wax, so that we're not directly competing on that brand new wax, but I can sell anything else. And so my whole business has been focused on singles, and I predominantly focus on lower end singles, right? But
Mhm.
being that this is a part-time deal for me, it's just a kind of a side hustle for me. I'm able to do that without having to worry about covering utility bills and covering all of those things. So I have people coming in every weekend, and I'm selling hundreds and thousands of quarter cards when people go through my player and team boxes, and they're focused on that. And so a lot of my business is kind of $10 and under, and junk wax. I sell a lot of junk wax, sealed boxes and stuff. So there's still
I bought something weird that I think might be junk wax. Keep going.
but so that kind of stuff is how business is going. But on the collecting side, I don't know. It's been the fun stuff. Like, I'll just grab a couple things. Like, so, um, I got like this. This is the Aerosmith rookie card.
Oh,
It's
that's cool.
it's from Sergeant Pepper's and the Lonely Hearts Club Band movie, the movie release that came out in the late '70s. So
Huh.
Aerosmith's first card in that same set is Steve
What
Martin's
is
first
that?
card, and
Wow.
so that kind of stuff has been fun to track down.
Yeah, that's
Um,
cool.
and then, like, like these these Star Wars cards were from Hershey's. They were just on the back of different candy bars, like the multi packs of candy bars.
Really?
And so they were all hand cut out deals. And there's I think eight different ones. I forget off the top of my head, but just tracking down some of that kind of stuff that is kind of fun and unique. Um, and then recently, because of the recent hubbub, I've got my Taylor Swift autograph CDs
Mm.
that I got off of her website
I love
a
that.
few
Can I
years
ask you a quick
ago.
question on that?
Yeah.
We were talking on the show this week, and it just came out. We were talking. What do you think a dual Taylor Travis card sells for today? It hits the market. It's a nice, like you. It's considered a nice one. It's like a dual patch auto. What does that sell for, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be big, at least right now, right? In the
Yeah,
midst of all of this, I think you're talking. I think it would go for four figures
four
plus.
figures. You said.
I think so.
Interesting. I said 10K plus.
Okay.
I think it can get like really weird. Like Taylor fans are pretty nutty. The Swifties are out here being crazy. People chase stuff like that. That'd be pretty sweet.
I mean, she signs a lot. Like those CDs that I got, it was like 2 years ago that I picked those up, and you could order four at a time, but I think
Hmm.
they were only like $25 a piece or something like that, signed by her, brand new. Maybe they were 30. Like, they weren't much, right?
Yeah.
They were cheap. And as much as she signs, her stuff still does really well. She's
Hmm.
pretty prolific, um but I think that kind of, especially in the near term, in the midst of what's going on right now, I think it would generate a lot of interest. Long
Yeah.
term, I think it all depends on how things play out with that
The two of them.
relationship, or the lack of relationship, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, music is an interesting one because artists sign a gajillion CDs, right? Like that's how they move. That's how they move copies of their CD. I think that's how that works for the most part, right? You buy an autographed copy to boost the sales of your copies. That to me is kind of like with baseball players. Like signed baseballs are not worth as much as their signed cards in a lot of
Yep.
scenarios. So I wonder what like a Taylor. I've never seen Taylor memorabilia be sold because I think she's still actively touring, so there's not as much memorabilia. But
Yep.
like, I don't know, like the boots she wore to some kind of big show. I want like that stuff. I think would do a lot.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that entertainment stuff has been neat to start to pay a little bit more attention to, and
Yeah.
and track down some of that kind of stuff. So those are the types of things that have been interesting me, over these last few months.
Let me just show you this quick box I bought here.
Ah,
This is I think it's what year is it? Hang on. 1993 Topps Nickelodeon.
yeah.
It's got like the Rugrat. Have you seen this set before?
I've seen it. I think I don't know a lot about it, but I've seen some of the stuff from it that surprised me of what it was going
It's
for.
like the Tommy Pickles rookie, all the Rugrats, and they're like stickers. They're sweet. I'm trying to hold this box until I'm really, really bored one day, and then I'm gonna open it.
Yeah, that could be fun. That could
Yeah.
be fun.
So
Very
yeah,
cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate you spending a few minutes today chatting, getting to know you a little bit better. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you or start following the show and checking out the show?
I appreciate it, Mike. We've talked on and off throughout the year, so I'm glad we finally got a chance to um, talk on microphone. So yeah, you can follow me at Lou Geneux. I would recommend following Card Talk. That's always where you can see my card takes, and you're not coming to this show right now to check out my stories where I talk about the Jets and losing bets. So I would say focus on at Card Talk Pod. That's where you can find everything. YouTube every week on 1:37 p.m.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Lou. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mike.